Welcome to Generative AI Futures. You know, we spend a massive amount of time on this show talking about the sheer brilliance of large language models. We call them geniuses. We marvel at their reasoning.
We treat them like these super brains that can solve anything.
Exactly. But I want to start today with a counterintuitive thought. What if these geniuses are actually incredibly inefficient? Like, embarrassingly inefficient.
It's a provocative way to start, but you're absolutely on the right track. We tend to conflate smart with efficient. But the research we are looking at today suggests that for a long time we've been forcing these models to work much, much harder than they need to.
The analogy that kept popping into my head while reading this paper was, imagine you hire a Nobel Prize-winning physicist to solve the mysteries of the universe.
Okay.
You're paying them a fortune. But instead of working on string theory, they're using half their brain power just to remember their own phone number.
That is, unfortunately, a surprisingly accurate description of the current state of the art. We're using a supercomputer to do the work of a Post-it note.
So today, we are doing a deep dive into a paper titled Enneagram, Scaling Large Language Models via Conditional Memory Lookup. And the mission here is to see if we can give the model a cheat sheet so it stops wasting its brain power.
Exactly. And to understand the solution, we have to really dig into the core problem, which the researchers call linguistic duality.
Linguistic duality. It sounds a bit academic. Break that down for us.
It sounds fancy, but it's actually quite intuitive. It just means that language modeling isn't one single task. It's really two very different tasks masquerading as one.
Okay.
On one side, you have compositional reasoning. That's the dynamic logic, the syntax, understanding complex ideas. That needs deep, heavy computation. That's your physicist work.
Right, the heavy lifting. So what's the other side?
The other side is just knowledge retrieval. Static, stereotyped patterns. You know, names, idioms, formulaic phrases like New York City or once upon a time.
Things you should just know, not figure out.
Exactly. You either know them or you don't. It should be a simple recall.
But right now, we treat them the same way.
We do. And that is the huge inefficiency. We force the model to use the same expensive neural circuitry to figure out quantum mechanics as it uses to figure out the capital of France is Paris.
Okay, let's make this concrete. The paper leads with a really specific example, what they call the Diana problem. This really clicked for me.
Yes, Diana, Princess of Wales. It's a classic problem. To you or me, that's one concept. You hear the name, you know who it is, instantly.
You don't have to, derive her existence from first principles.
But a transformer model does. It doesn't know anything, it predicts everything. The researchers looked inside the layers and, well, it's pretty shocking. In layers 1 and 2, the model is just figuring out the geographic context. Wales.
Just the word Wales.
Yes. It takes until layer 6 for the model to finally reconstruct the specific representation of the historical figure.
Wait, hang on. So you're saying it spends the first 6 layers, a huge chunk of the model's total depth, just figuring out who we're talking about?
Essentially, yes. It's using deep sequential computation to simulate what should be a simple memory lookup. It's deriving the phone number from scratch every single time.
That is wild. It's like walking into a meeting and spending the first 10 minutes just staring at your colleague, trying to reconstruct their name from the shape of their face before you can even say hello.
And that's the waste. Transformers lack a native lookup primitive. They don't have a contact list. So the solution in this paper is a new architectural module called Enneagram.
Okay, which brings us to the sci-fi part. Enneagram sounds like memory traces in the brain. But what is it technically?
It's actually the modernization of a very old concept, the engram.
Engrams, you mean like the old school statistics stuff,
Yeah.
counting how often cat follows the... That feels like going backward.
It does seem like that, doesn't it? But they gave it a massive, massive upgrade. Enneagram provides conditional memory. Think of it as a complement to mixture of experts, or MOE.
Right. MOE is conditional computation.
Exactly. MOE turns parts of the brain on or off. Enneagram does conditional memory. It decides whether to look something up or to think about it.
So how does it work under the hood? Is it just a giant database bolted onto the side of the model?
Closer to a hash table. When the model sees a sequence of text, it performs an O1 lookup.
Oh, one. That means constant time, right?
Right. Instant. It doesn't matter if the table has 1,000 entries or 1 billion. The retrieval speed is the same. It just hashes the phrase, Diana, Princess of Wales, hits the table, and boom, here's the complete vector representation for Diana. No thinking required.
Okay, but managing a table that big sounds messy. The paper mentions something about tokenizer compression and a surjective function. My eyes kind of glazed over there. Can you explain that in simple terms?
Sure, it's a really clever engineering trick. Think about the word apple. In a standard model, apple with a capital A and apple with a space and a lowercase a are often treated as totally different things.
Right, because the computer just sees different characters.
Exactly, but they usually mean the same thing. So storing them separately in your memory table is just a waste of space. The surjective function just maps all those variations to a single entry. It says apple, apple, APLE, you all go to the same bin.
So it's basically just decluttering the filing cabinet.
Precisely. This trick compresses the vocabulary by about 23%. You're maximizing the semantic density of the memory, fitting more meaning into the same space.
Efficient. But I have a nagging question here. If it's just looking things up in a static table, isn't that kind of dumb? What happens when the context changes? You know, Apple the fruit versus Apple the company.
That is the critical question.
If I type, I eat an apple, and it pulls up the vector for the tech giant, the whole thing falls apart.
And that's the conditional part of conditional memory. It's not a dumb table. It uses what's called context-aware gating.
So it checks with the main brain before letting the memory in.
Exactly. The model uses its current hidden state, what it's thinking about right now, as a query. It checks the retrieved memory against that query. If the memory contradicts the context, like getting the tech company vector when you're talking about baking a pie, the gate just closes.
It says nope and shuts it down.
It suppresses the noise. It only lets the memory through if it makes sense in the moment.
Okay, that makes sense. That filters it. Now this leads to the big strategic question. Parameter budgets. You only have so much compute. If you're building a model, how do you split the resources?
This is what they call the sparsity allocation problem. Do you build more thinking parts, the MOE experts, or more memory parts, the enneagram table?
And the default has always been just dump everything into the thinking parts, right? Just make the brain bigger and hope it remembers stuff.
Traditionally, yes. But this research found a very distinct U-shaped scaling law.
A U-shaped curve. So the answer isn't at either extreme.
Correct. If you go 100% experts, performance is suboptimal because of that Diana problem. But if you go 100% memory, the model becomes a dumb dictionary that can't reason at all.
So there's a sweet spot in the middle.
There is.
Where is it? What's the golden ratio?
It's approximately 80% experts and 20% enneagram memory.
Wow. So the ideal AI brain is actually about 1/5 pure lookup table.
Roughly, yes. Reallocating about 20 to 25% of the sparse parameters to enneagram gave them the lowest validation loss. It just stops the model from wasting all that energy on static patterns.
So by making the model dumber, in a way, by replacing some neurons with a spreadsheet, it actually gets smarter.
That's the paradox. And this is where the results get really surprising. You would assume a memory module helps with, well, memory.
Yeah, trivia, facts, what is the capital of France, that kind of thing.
And it does. On knowledge benchmarks, scores went up significantly, but the biggest surprises were not in knowledge. They were in reasoning.
Wait, really? The memory module helped it think better. That doesn't immediately track for me.
It helped a lot. We're talking about math and code. On Human Eval, a coding benchmark, the Enneagram model beat the compute-matched MOE model by 3 points. On math, it was up 2.4 points. And on ARC Challenge, which is general reasoning, it jumped 3.7 points.
Okay, you have to explain this. It seems completely counterintuitive. Why would a lookup table help you write Python code or solve a geometry problem? You can't just memorize the answer to a problem you've never seen before.
This brings us back to the Diana problem and a concept the paper calls effective depth. This is probably the most important technical insight in the entire deep dive.
Okay, effective depth. Unpack that for us.
They use some really cool analysis tools, LogitLens and CKA, to look inside the model's brain, layer by layer. Remember how the standard model wastes layers 1 through 6 just figuring out who Diana is?
Yeah, it's just spinning its wheels.
Yeah. Well, because Engram handles that instantly, specifically at layer 2, the model reaches a prediction-ready state much, much faster. They found that layer 5 of the Engram model was semantically equivalent to layer 12 of the baseline MOE model.
Whoa. So layer 5 is doing the work that used to take 12 layers.
Exactly. By offloading the facts, the entities to Engram early on, the rest of the layers are freed up to focus on the how. the complex logic.
Okay, let me try an analogy. If I'm taking a really complex math test and I have to struggle to remember what hypotenuse or integer means, I'm burning brain cells on definitions. I have less mental energy left for the actual calculation.
That is the perfect analogy.
But if those definitions are just instantly available on a cheat sheet, I don't waste time on the what. I can focus entirely on solving the equation.
That's it. Enneagram effectively deepens the network. It clears the clutter so the deep computation can be used for deep thoughts, not just for remembering what things are called. The model is smarter because it isn't distracted by the basics.
That is fascinating. It's not just about knowing more. It's about clearing the runway for thinking.
And that clearing the runway effect has another huge benefit for something everyone is obsessed with right now: long context.
Right, the needle in a haystack problem.
Right.
The ability to dump a whole book into the prompt and have the model find one specific detail.
And standard models really struggle with this, but look at the comparison here. They tested Enneagram 27B versus MOE 27B in a controlled iso-loss setting.
Meaning they were basically equally good models to start with.
Exactly, a fair fight. On the multi-query needle in a haystack test, the standard MOE model scored an 84.2.
Which is, okay, a B minus, maybe?
The Enneagram model scored 97.0.
That is a massive jump, 84 to 97. That's the difference between passing and getting a top grade.
And on variable tracking, which is even harder, like tracking a variable through thousands of lines of code, MOE was at 77.0. Enneagram was at 89.0.
Why? What is it about the lookup table that helps it find the needle?
It liberates the attention mechanism. In a standard transformer, the attention heads have to do two jobs at once: local reconstruction of phrases and global tracking of the plot.
So they're overworked.
Totally. But by delegating the local stuff, the 2 grams and 3 grams, to the lookup table, the attention mechanism is free. It doesn't have to focus on the trees, so it can finally see the forest.
It's not worrying about the Princess of Wales, so it can track dependencies across the entire
Oh,
document.
exactly.
This all sounds like a huge win, but I want to be the skeptic for a second. There has to be a catch. We're talking about storing massive tables of information. GPU memory HBM is the most expensive real estate on the planet right now.
You're right. That is usually the bottleneck. You can't just stuff a 100 billion parameter table onto an H100 GPU. It physically won't fit.
And if you put it on a regular hard drive, it's way too slow. So
Yeah.
does that kill the idea?
This is where the system design gets really clever. They use a strategy called prefetch and overlap.
Prefetch and overlap. Sounds like a logistics strategy.
It is. See, with the standard MOE, the routing is dynamic. You don't know which expert you need until you've already computed the current step. It's reactive.
Right. You can't plan ahead.
But Ingram lookups are deterministic. They're based purely on the input text. If the text says apple pie, instantly that you need the apple pie vector.
Oh, so as soon as the user types the prompt, the system knows exactly which memories it's going to need for the entire generation.
Before the layer even computes. This means the system can start fetching those memories from the host RAM, the cheap, plentiful DRAM, like in your laptop, and send it over to the GPU while the GPU is busy computing the previous layers.
So the data is traveling while the GPU is already working, so there's no waiting around.
Exactly. It completely hides the latency. They benchmarked this on an H800 cluster. Offloading a massive 100 billion parameter table incurred less than 3% latency overhead.
Less than 3%. That's negligible. That's basically free.
It is. And it works because of one more linguistic fact: the Zipfian distribution.
Remind us what that is.
It's the long tail of language. We use a very small number of words all the time: the ye, is, and a massive number of words very, very rarely.
The 80-20 rule, basically.
Exactly. So the system is smart. It caches the hot patterns, the common stuff, right there on the GPU's expensive memory. But the millions of rare facts, the long tail, that stays in cheap RAM until the moment it's needed.
This implies we could have basically infinite memory.
We are moving toward an era where the size of a model's knowledge is no longer constrained by the cost of its GPU.
It really changes the picture. We've been trying to make the brain bigger when maybe we just needed to give it a bigger library card.
That's the takeaway.
So let's recap. We started with the Diana problem models, wasting huge amounts of compute just to remember basic facts.
Then we saw how Enneagram solves this with conditional memory, these instant O1 lookups that act like a cheat sheet.
We learned about the sparsity allocation law, that the sweet spot isn't a 100% brain, but at 80% thinking and 20% memory.
And the big aha moment: that offloading memory doesn't just help with facts. It boosts reasoning, math, and code because of effective depth.
It clears the mental clutter so the model can actually think.
Yeah.
And finally, the infrastructure piece. We can keep these giant memories in cheap RAM without slowing things down.
It's a paradigm shift. We are decoupling static storage from dynamic reasoning.
So here's a thought to leave you with. If we can offload 100 billion parameters of knowledge to cheap RAM for basically free, are we approaching a point where a model's intelligence and its knowledge are two completely separate things you can buy?
That's the provocation. Imagine a world where you buy the reasoning engine, the IQ, from one company, and then you plug in a memory cartridge from another.
A medical memory for doctors, a legal memory for lawyers.
Or a personal memory of your entire life. What happens when a model has access to everything instantly for free? That is the infinite memory regime.
It's a fascinating future to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Enneagram revolution.
My pleasure.
And thank you for listening. We'll see you next time on Generative AI Futures.